Hello again, everybody. Before hibernation, I did a video on how to put your ants into hibernation. So today I'm just going to do a talk about how to bring your ants out of hibernation. Now, it's too early just yet to really be doing this, and I'll talk about that in a second. But obviously, I know that, or you know, that I like to make my videos ahead of time so that you know what to expect and what's coming up. So for the channel, I plan to take my ants out of hibernation probably. I think they should be out on Tuesday, the 22nd of February. Now, that's being very specific, but it's because I've got that week off, and hopefully I'm going to get a lot of good videos of the ants doing new things, their new setup, them exploring that new setup, and some little things that I've got planned for next season. So I'm hoping that that's going to be a great week for videos, and that'll be my return to making videos properly. So the questions then that you're probably asking. So the first one is, how long do they need to be in hibernation? Well, the absolute truthful answer is that we don't know. As I said in my hibernation video, I've seen a study on a different species to Lasius niger, and it was just one study, and they looked at the larvae of Lasius japonicus and found that they refused to pupate until they had experienced at least 90 days of cold. And this is a protection mechanism to stop them accidentally pupating in the middle of winter if there was an unseasonably warm day. So they, if there was the sun shone in December, they don't all pupate, and then it goes cold again and it kills them. So that was the reason for it. Now, this is a different species, and it's very dangerous to take things that are true about one species and apply it to a different species. So the truth is, we don't actually know, but a minimum of 3 months and somewhere closer to 4 months, but it doesn't have to be the full 4 months. So like I said, I had mine in by the 1st of November, and if I bring them out on the 22nd of February, they'll have had all of November, all of December, all of January, and most of February. That should be fine. If you put your ants in later than the 1st of November to hibernation, then obviously you would have to go on later at the end. So what happens if you do bring them out a little bit early? Because I know, especially you first-time ant keepers, you're going to be so impatient to start ant keeping, and you can't wait for this bringing them out of hibernation. I know people will bring them out earlier than the 22nd of February. Well, really, the main thing that will happen if you bring them out too early, as long as they've had enough time and they develop properly, is that next year or next autumn, they will want to go back into hibernation a little bit early. Now, I personally don't consider this a bad thing. I like it that in October, if I give my ants a couple of chilly days, they're immediately packing up, that they're stopping pupating, the queen's stopping laying eggs, they're starting to bunch all the larvae together in a big pile. I like them to be getting ready in October, so it's nice and easy. I'm not hanging around waiting for those last few pupae or waiting for the queen to stop laying eggs. I get mine ready early and I get them in on time. So that's the first thing, and I'm not too fussed personally about that because it helps me next autumn. Another thing is, if you are, as I do, feeding wild caught insects, just be aware there aren't any insects around at this time of year. I've got some insects in the fridge that I caught last year that should tide me through until there's enough insects for me to actually be able to catch wild caught again. But that's just something that you might want to consider. Now, obviously, if you're buying feeder insects for your ants, this is no issue because they're available all year round. The next thing then is, how do I know that hibernation has been successful? Well, the signs that you are looking for is that the queen will start laying again, and the larvae that came through hibernation will turn to pupa. And those larvae that came through hibernation should go to pupa relatively quickly. Normally it takes them about a week, and you should have a giant pile of pupa, and the queen should then start churning out eggs. It does take your ants a little while to wake up, and the queen takes longer than the workers, so it normally takes at least a week of them being warm before they realise that hibernation's over and they start all this activity again. And a little side note here, you will actually have a period in a couple of weeks after coming out of hibernation where your ants won't be very interested in protein because they haven't got any larvae. Because what will happen is the larvae that came through hibernation will turn to pupa, and the queen will lay new eggs. You will get a period where there's eggs and pupa, but none of the in-between, the larvae stage, or very few of the larvae stage. And they will be like that for maybe 2 or 3 weeks as the new eggs catch up and turn to larvae. And so maybe for that 2 or 3 weeks, they will want less protein than they normally would. So just be aware of that happening. The other thing to say here as well about ants waking up is that sometimes in hibernation, ants can look like they've died, especially sometimes the queen. They will curl up, they will be completely unmoving. And when you warm them up, they can sometimes stay curled up and unmoving. It is actually quite uncommon for ants to die in hibernation. Normally, they die in hibernation because of 2 things. Either A, you let them freeze, or B, you let them dry out. So as long as they've been kept humid and you haven't frozen them, do not automatically think that an ant is dead. Give it at least a week, if not 2 weeks, of warmth before you say, yeah, that one has unfortunately died, because you will probably find that some of those that you think are dead will wake up and start being active again. And another thing here is once they're out of hibernation, we're going to be introducing them potentially to their first nest and moving them into new setups. Always think about hibernation. Everything I do with my Lasius niger is thinking about the future. It's thinking about next year. And if I am going to put them into a particular nest or a particular setup, I'm always thinking, how am I going to get this in the fridge next November? So make that one of the top things that you think about when you are planning this year. Now, yes, I've been out this winter. I've been looking around on the pavements, on the verges, on bits of grass. I've been picking up twigs. I've been picking up stones. Particularly, I look for certain type of stones that have flat surfaces so that I can use them as feeding platforms and they rest smoothly on the bottom of the outworld. And as I've said in previous videos, I like light coloured things in my outworld so that the ants have a better contrast against the light coloured background. Helps me to see them better. But if you haven't yet been doing these sort of things, now is the time to start planning what you're going to decorate your outworld with and starting to look for stones, twigs, things like that you might find lying around. And then finally, I want to talk about the one big danger of coming out of hibernation. How should you take your ants out of hibernation? Now, there are 2 schools of thought on bringing the ants out of hibernation. There is one school of thought that says that if you, what they call temperature shock them, if you take them from a cold temperature straight into a warm temperature, they could be temperature shocked and that could kill them for suddenly warming up. There are other people who say that's nonsense and that you can't temperature shock an ant. I actually am leaning towards siding with those that say it's nonsense and you can't temperature shock an ant, but this is one of those things whereby why take the risk? Why? If some people think it might happen, let's bring them out of hibernation a little bit slowly. And by slowly, I do not mean like the time that you put them into hibernation. This is not a 2-week process to warm them up. We're talking maybe 3 to 4 days, but do try to warm them up gradually over 3 to 4 days, just to get them used to the warmer temperatures. And this is super, super important if your ants are in a test tube. Now, a little bit of here about physics of water. As water cools, it takes up less space than when it's warmer. So what that means is that the water in the cotton of the cotton wool in the end of the reservoir of water in your test tube, if the water took up less space, it meant that more water could then be absorbed by the cotton wool. So the cotton wool is now holding more water inside it than it normally would if the temperature is higher. And when you warm that test tube up, that excess water has got to go somewhere. And the only place it can go is to leak out of the cotton. So what will happen, and this is unavoidable, you will not stop some leakage, is that your cotton wool will start to leak as you warm it up. So it's important that you warm up slowly to give the ants time to become active, because you don't want to suddenly flood them with water when they're really sleepy and haven't got the energy, or they're not awake enough to actually move out of the way. Warm it up slowly and keep an eye on it. And also what I would recommend is that you keep the front of the tube tipped up slightly. So if you do have a test tube stand, put the stand at the front of the tube so that any water is running towards the back of the tube away from where the ants live. So I put this tube into my fridge on Wednesday, and today's Sunday, so it's fresh cotton, which makes it more absorbent than perhaps the slightly degraded cotton that you might have in your test tubes. So the effect here isn't going to be as big as it potentially would be in your tube. But what I did was I did the worst possible thing that you could do with this, and I put it on the radiator to warm it up. So it warmed up incredibly quickly. And now I'm just showing pictures of this is how much water came out of it. It's not a massive amount, as you can see, but there is definitely a little puddle of water that's come out of it, and a lot of condensation on the tube itself, which, as that condensation sticks together, meets other bits of condensation, it will become bigger drops and it will start to flow. It'll run around the edge of the tube and start to pool on the bottom. So there's always going to be like this, a lot of water floating around when you come out of hibernation. So just be very, very careful with your test tubes. Warm them up slowly, like I said, over 3 to 4 days. Keep a very close eye on your ants as they come out of hibernation, and make sure that you don't drown them. As one of my subscribers said to me when I was chatting to them on Discord, wouldn't it be terrible if you've spent 4 months hibernating your ants only to drown them in those final few days as you bring them out of hibernation? So please, please, please do keep an eye on that. Right, that's everything I wanted to say about coming out of hibernation and what you need to look out for and what you need to do. Like I said, fresh videos coming, starting that week around the 20th of February. I'll probably have a video before I bring my ants out of hibernation showing you my layout, my new setup, what my plans are, but not long to go now, and then I will be back. And thank you to everybody who's stuck with the channel over the winter where there's been very, very few videos. Thank you for staying with me. And like I said, new content very soon. Goodbye, everybody, and best of luck. And can't wait to see you with ant colonies charging ahead for the new year very soon. Goodbye, everybody.